Hi everybody, welcome to another Lost Years of Merlin series stream. This is chapter 30 called Baylor, and in the last chapter they trekked, it wasn't super long, but they trekked just to where the otherworld well is. Libria led them there. So this is chapter 30, Baylor. Night fell cold and dark. Although after my story Rhea seemed to have drifted off to sleep, I continued to lie awake, turning over and over on the rocks. For a while I watched the westernmost sky, recalling Gleary of the golden hair, but mostly I stared at the ghostly remnant of the waning crescent moon above our heads. In the morning, at most 2 days would remain. Throughout the night, I shivered from the chill air of these treeless hills, and from the thought of that merciless eye whose merest glance meant death. The vision that I had seen in the Lake of the Face stalked me. When I dozed, which wasn't much, I struggled and flailed. I awoke as the first rays of light touched the black-strewn slope. No chirping birds or scurrying beasts greeted this dawn, only wind howling in long, lonely gusts across the ridges. Stiffly I stretched, the place between my shoulders throbbing painfully. I bent to the clear pool, which wore a delicate collar of ice, and took a last drink. Cold, hungry, and grim, we set off. Rhea strode solemnly over the spiky rocks, her bark shoes blackened by charcoal. Wordlessly, she led us in the direction of the sunrise, yet none of us paused to savor the rich bands of orange and pink that were spreading across the horizon. Absorbed in our own thoughts, we continued to trek in silence. Several times the loose rocks gave way beneath my feet, sending me sliding backward. Once I fell over, slicing my knee on a rock. Late that morning, as we reached the top of another slope, Rhea slowed her pace. She halted, casting me a worried glance. Without a word, she raised her arm, pointing to the next ridge. A great gouge split the crest, looking as if the jaws of a mythic beast had clamped down on it ages ago, ripping away the very rocks. Even as I stared at the gouge, it seemed to stare back. I chewed my lip, certain that the otherworld well stood on that spot. Why hadn't the mighty Dagda simply descended from on high and struck Baylor down? Surely, as the greatest warrior of all, he could have easily done so. Perhaps Dagda was fully occupied with battling Rita Gower himself, or perhaps he didn't want mere mortals to enter the otherworld, whatever their reasons. I took the lead. Rhea stayed at my heels, so close that I could hear her anxious breathing behind me. As we dropped down into the next scorched valley, I found myself scanning the rubble for any sign at all of something green, something living. But no springs bubbled here. No moss filled the cracks. The rocks lay as bare as my own hopes. Slowly, we climbed toward the great gorge. When at last we reached its very edge, Rhea grabbed the sleeve of my tunic. For several seconds, she probed me with her gaze. Then, her voice a whisper, she spoke her first words of the day. The eye. You mustn't look into the eye. I clasped the hilt of my sword. I'll do my best. Merlin, I wish we had a little more time for sharing days and sharing secrets. I furrowed my brow, unsure of what she meant. But there is no time now to find out. Setting my jaw, I handed her my staff, then I marched into the gorge. As I stepped between the dark cliffs that rose sharply to either side, I felt as if I were striding into the open mouth of a monster. Pinnacles as jagged as the dragon's teeth jutted from the rims of the cliffs. A frigid wind slapped my face, screaming in my ears. As I moved deeper into the gorge, the air quivered ominously, as if shaken by footsteps that could be neither seen nor heard. Yet I found nothing else. For the jagged black rocks shining in the morning light, the place seemed utterly empty. No Baylor, no stairwell, no sign of anything living or dead. Thinking I might have missed something, I started to turn, when all of a sudden the wind lashed me again. The air before me darkened, then quivered. This time, however, it parted like an invisible curtain. Out of the air itself stepped a huge, muscled warrior, standing at least twice my own size. Baylor. Towering above me, he seemed almost as broad as the cliffs themselves. His deep, wrathful growl echoed within the great gouge as his heavy boots slammed down on the rocks. Slowly, he lifted his gleaming sword. I caught sight of the horns above his ears and the dark brow over his one enormous eye before turning my second sight aside. I must look at something else. Not his head. The sword. I'll try the sword. Barely had I focused on his broad, gleaming blade than it clashed against my own, my arm reeling from the powerful blow. To my surprise, the ogre grunted at the impact, as if the magic of my own sword had caught him off guard. Again he growled, then swung his weapon with even more force. I leaped to the side just as his blade crashed against the rocks where I had stood only a split second before. Sparks flew into the air, singeing my tunic. As if the blurred edges of my second sight weren't enough of a disadvantage, I could not look directly at him for fear of glimpsing his eye. As the ogre raised his arm to strike again, I thrust at him, but he spun away in time. Pivoting with uncanny speed, he charged straight at me, his sword slashing the air. Caught by surprise, I backed away. Suddenly, my heel struck a rock. I hopped backward, trying desperately to keep my balance, but tumbled over in a heap. Baylor released a vengeful snarl as he marched toward me, lifting his sword high. It was all I could do to avoid looking at his face, his eye. At that instant, Rhea sprinted out of the shadows and threw herself at the ogre. She lunged at his feet, holding tight to his thigh. He tried to kick free, but she continued to cling to him. This distracted him just long enough for me to roll to the side and leap to my feet. Before I could renew the attack, however, Baylor roared angrily at Rhea. He seized her by the arm, ripping her loose. Then, roaring again, he whipped her around and hurled her headlong at the cliff wall. Face first, she slammed into the rocks. She staggered backward, then slumped motionless on the ground. My heart split in two at the sight. Just then, Bumblebee emerged from hiding and ran to her side, waving his arms wildly. Seething with rage, I charged straight at the ogre, swinging my sword while still averting my gaze. Yet Baylor sidestepped me with ease. His fist smashed into my shoulder, sending me sprawling. The sword flew out of my hand and clattered on the rocks. I crawled madly after it. A huge boot kicked me in the chest. I flew through the air and landed with a thud on my back. My ribs screamed with pain. The pinnacles of the cliff seemed to wobble and whirl above me. Before I could try to sit up, Baylor's immense hand closed around my throat. He squeezed until I gagged. Then, with a sharp jerk, he lifted me into the air. My head swam. I flailed my arms and legs, swaying helplessly. But he only squeezed tighter, throttling me. I pounded on his arm, trying desperately to breathe. Slowly, he lowered me, until our faces almost touched. His grip tightened. His snarl tore at my ears. Then, pulled by a spell I no longer had the strength to resist, I looked into his dark eye. Like a pit of quicksand, it drew me in. With all my remaining power, I fought to break free, but I couldn't resist the eye. It pulled me deeper, deeper, sucking out all my strength. Darkness shrouded my vision. I felt myself go limp. I should just give in, just let go. I stopped trying to fight, stopped trying to breathe. Suddenly, I heard Baylor roar in agony. He released my throat. I fell onto the rocks, coughing and gasping. Air filled my lungs again. The darkness clung to me for another moment, then faded away. Weakly, I raised myself up on one elbow, just in time to see Baylor collapse on the rocks. He fell with the force of a toppled tree. From his back protruded a sword, my sword, and standing behind him was Rhea, half her face bloody. Her neck bent strangely as if she couldn't straighten it. Then her own legs gave out and she crumpled next to the fallen ogre. "Rhea!" I called hoarsely, crawling to her side. Bumblebee appeared, looking grimmer than grim. He lifted me by the arms so that I could stand. As I stumbled over to Rhea, I heard him moan. "I told her she'd kill herself if she moved, but she wouldn't listen." I knelt by her side. Gently lifting her head with my hands, I tried to straighten her neck. Above one ear I found a deep gash. It bled profusely, staining her suit of woven vines as well as the rocks. Carefully, I sprinkled some of the herbs from my satchel on the wound. "Rhea, I'll help you." Her gray-blue eyes opened halfway. "Merlin," she whispered, "this time, there's nothing you can do." "No," I shook my head vigorously. "You're going to be all right." With difficulty she swallowed. "It's my time to die, I'm sure. When I looked in the lake of the face, I saw you fighting Baylor and losing. But I also saw one of us dying. It wasn't you, it was me." Holding her, I tried to pour my strength into her head and neck. I tore off the bottom of my sleeve and pressed it against her skin, willing the gash to heal as I had willed her bone to knit itself together in Eagle's Canyon. Yet I knew that these injuries were far more severe than a broken arm. Even the torn vines of her garb seemed to be fading a little with each passing second, their vibrant green showing hints of shadows. "It doesn't have to be that way, Rhea." "Oh yes, it does. I never told you, but I was told, long ago, that my life would be lost to spare yours. That staying with you would mean my own death. I wasn't sure whether to believe it until now." "What nonsense!" I concentrated harder on the wounds, but the blood continued to flow, soaking the cloth and seeping through my fingers. "What fool ever told you such a thing?" "No fool. Our Bassa. That's why you were never welcome inside the door." I winced. "You can't die now, not because of some foolish prophecy." I bent lower. "Listen to me, Rhea. These prophecies are worthless. Worthless! A prophecy said the only child of a human blood could kill Baylor, right? Well, you saw what happened. Baylor had me in his death grip. I was helpless. I, the child of human blood. It was you, not me, who killed him." "That's because I, too, have human blood." "What? You're a Finkyran. You're—" "Merlin." Rhea's eyelids quivered as the wind wailed beneath the cliffs. "I am your sister." I felt as if Baylor's boot had once again slammed into my ribs. "My what?" "Your sister." She drew a difficult breath. "Ellen is my mother, too. That's another reason I had to come." I pounded the black rocks with my fist. "It can't be true." "It is true," declared Bumblebee. He bent his lanky frame to kneel beside me. "When Ellen of the sapphire eyes gave birth to you in a wrecked ship somewhere on our shores, she also gave birth a few minutes later to a daughter. She named the boy Emrys and the girl Rhiannon. The bards of Finkyra all know that story." His glum sigh melted into the wind. "And also the story of how that daughter was lost as an infant. Her parents were traveling through Druma Wood when they were attacked by a band of warrior goblins, the soldiers of Rita Gower. A fierce battle ensued. The goblins finally scattered, but in the turmoil one of Ellen's twins, the girl, was lost. Hundreds of people searched for weeks, without success, until at long last even Ellen stopped looking. Heartbroken, all she could do was pray to Dagda that her daughter might someday be found." Rhea nodded weakly. "And she was, by a treeling, Quen. It was she who brought me to our Bassa." "My sister!" Tears welled in my sightless eyes. "You are my sister." "Yes, Merlin." If the towering cliffs had caved in and crushed me just then, I would have felt no greater pain. I had found my only sibling, and yet, as had happened so many times before, I was about to lose what I had only just found. Tuatha, I remembered now, had warned me that the prophecy about a child of human blood could have an unexpected meaning. It may be true, and it may be false, yet even if it is true, the truth often has more than one face. How could I have possibly known that it would be the face of Rhea? "Why?" I asked in a quavering voice. "Didn't you tell me before?" "I didn't want you to change your course or try to protect me. What you do with your life is important." "Your life is just as important." I threw away the bloody rag and tore a new piece off my sleeve. Even if I tried to mop the gash, I recalled a night long ago in Capri's room full of books. So this was why he had hesitated so strangely in telling me the story of my birth. I had suspected then, and knew now, that he was on the verge of telling me something more, that a sister had been born on that same night. I cradled Ria's head in my lap, feeling her warm breath on my arm. Her eyelids had nearly closed. The shadows of her garb deepened. As a tear slid down my cheek, I said, "If only I could have seen." Her eyelids fluttered. "Seen? Are you talking about your eyes?" "No, no." I watched the blood dripping from her brown curls. "This isn't about my eyes. It's about something else. Something my heart has known all along. That you are, well, more than someone I just happened to meet that day in Druma Wood. My heart knew that from the very start." She made a slight movement with her lips that could have been a grin. "Even when I hung you up in that tree?" "Even then. Ria, my heart could see it, but my head just didn't understand. I should have paid more attention to my heart, I'm telling you. The heart can see things invisible to the eye." A blue flash erupted from the rocks where Ria had left my staff. Without even looking, I knew that it bore a new marking in the shape of an eye. For I had discovered, somehow, the soul of seeing, yet my gain paled in comparison to my loss. In the same instant, the air began to shimmer near the outstretched arm of the fallen ogre. The invisible curtain parted, revealing a low circle of polished white stones. A well. Not a stairwell leading up, but a deep well leading down. I could see it, and I also understood for the first time that the pathway to the other world, to heaven and also to hell, meant going down, not up. Down into the very deepest places, not up to somewhere in the universe far removed from myself. The bitter wind swept over us, howling. Ria spoke so faintly that I could hardly hear her. "You will be a wizard, Merlin. A good one." I lifted her head to my chest. "Don't die, Ria. Don't die." She shuddered. Her eyes closed at last. I held her tight, sobbing quietly. Then, as if the dawn were breaking within my very arms, I sensed the presence of something that I had not noticed before. Something within Ria's body, yet apart from it as well. Passing through my fingers like a breeze of light. Her spirit. Leaving her body on its way to the realm beyond. In a flash, an idea seized me. I called to her spirit. "Please, Ria, don't leave me, not yet." I pulled her head close to my heart. "Come with me, stay with me, just for a while." I glanced toward the circle of white stones, the entry to the other world, the pathway to Dagda. Even if it were too late to save Ellen, maybe, just maybe, he could still save Ria. And if not, at least we might be together for a little while longer. "Come with me, please." I inhaled deeply, drawing far more than air. And with that breath, a powerful new feeling flooded into me. It was vibrant. It was robust. It was Ria. I turned to Bumblebee, whose drooping cheeks showed the streaks of his own tears. "Help me up, will you?" Solemnly he eyed me. "She is dead." Dead. I felt the new life force within me, but not gone, my good jester. With difficulty, Bumblebee helped me to my feet. In my arms I bore the empty body of Ria, her head dangling. "Now bring me my sword, and my staff." Shaking his head, the dour jester pulled the sword out of Baylor. He used his boots to wipe the blade clean. Then he gathered up my staff from the rocks. Returning to me, he slid my sword into its scabbard and the staff into my blood-soaked belt. He studied me somberly. "Where are you going with her?" "To the other world." His eyebrows lifted. "Then I will wait here for you, even though you won't ever return." I started toward the ring of white stones, then stopped to face him again. "Bumblebee, in case I don't return, I want you to know something." He gave me a many-layered frown. "What is that?" "You are a terrible jester, but a loyal friend." With that, I turned toward the well. I strode across the rocks, my arms as heavy as my heart. Okay, well, thank you for joining me, everybody. Tomorrow will be chapter 31 called Into the Mist. Have a wonderful night.